Hey guys, today we're going to do a video on queues. And a queue is just a data structure that follows a first in, first out basis. So the first element that I put in this data structure is going to be the first element plucked out. So this first element would be 1 in this case. So I'm going to run through queues in ES6 syntax, which is like the new way that you do it. And then I'm also going to show you the old school way, which is like the functional class way. But first, let's do the ES6 syntax. So I'm going to say class queue, use the brackets here. I'm going to make a constructor. Okay, inside the constructor, I'm going to specify where I want to store all the values in my queue, and I'll call that storage. So we'll say this.storage equals an empty array. And it's kind of beyond the scope of this video to talk about the this keyword. Just know that I'm using this to store values in this array here. Okay, so within a class we can make methods, and one of the methods I want to do is called add to queue. It's going to take a value, and I'm going to push that value to my storage. So I could say this.storage push value. All right. And now I want to be able to print the value of what's in my storage. So I'll make another method called print. And it's just going to be a console.log of this.storage. Notice the different syntax here because I'm in this class. When I'm making my methods or my functions, I'm not calling the function keyword. I can just write it like this and it's fine. And finally, we need to make a method called retrieve, which is going to retrieve the first element that was put into the array, which in this case is a 1. So I'll make a function called retrieve, and it's going to console.log this.storage, not pop, because pop would give me that 5, right? I need 1, so it's actually going to be the .shift method. And this is going to mutate the array of this.storage. So this is pretty much the structure of the queue in the class format. Now let's set it to a variable. I'll call it myQueue equals new queue. And now that I've made this variable, I have access to all the properties and methods inside of queue. So I could say myQueue add to queue. And let's pass in some values here that we want to add to our queue. I'm going to copy and paste this a couple times. Put in some unique values. Okay. And now I want to see those values, so I will call myQueue.print. Let's see what happens here. There you see the storage has been filled with these values that we pushed, 5, 3, and 6. So let's call the retrieve method to get that very first value, which in this case would be the 5, right? Because that's the very first value that was pushed into the array. And then after that, I'm going to call myQueue.print just to see like where we're at in our storage. So I run that. You can see the initial values right here. Then we have that 5 we retrieve, and then now the array has been mutated. The storage array has been mutated, and we're left with 3 and 6. So that looks good. That's pretty much ES6 syntax. Pretty similar to the stack video if you saw that one. Let's do the functional class way now, okay? So I'm going to make a function. I'll delete all this. Make a function called queue. All right. And if you do a functional class, the main thing you got to remember is you're just creating an object and then you're returning that object, more or less. So I'm going to say const obj equals an empty object. I'm going to return obj when all's said and done. Now let's go about making our storage. So I would say obj.storage equals an empty array. Now pretty much the same thing as ES6 syntax, except I'm just going to be using obj dot, whatever method I want to use. So let's make that. So add to queue is one of them, and that's going to equal a function. And we're just going to push to our storage. So I'd say obj.storage push, and that's going to take a value. And then print equals a function console.log obj.storage. And then finally the retrieve method equals a function and that is just going to do the shift method again. So I'll say console.log obj.storage.shift, and that's going to mutate our obj.storage array. So that looks good. Now let's just assign it to a variable. Same thing as last time, but this time we're going to assign it to the function queue, and we're going to have to call that function. Now if I do myQueue.addToQueue, and I can pass in a bunch of different values here, try to put in some unique values. All right, that looks good. Let's print the queue. If I run that, you can see same thing as last time. I'm printing those values. Now let's double check to make sure that our retrieve function works as well. Okay, and then I'm going to print my queue or my storage a second time afterwards. And that looks correct. So you can see that we're grabbing that first value when we call the retrieve method because it's a first in, first out architecture. And then the array is permanently mutated whenever you call the method shift. So that is how you would do a queue in ES6 syntax at the very beginning of this video, and then this is the class, functional class method. So thanks for watching, guys. Until next time.